Alright, folks, today the Bearded Wonder is going to explain to you American colonial government. So, first thing we want to understand is what the heck is a colony? Well, basically, a colony was an easy way for people in England to get rid of religious and political dissenters. If you were in England and you didn't like the king, you just send them off to the colony. It's also a way to sell manufactured goods. So England has a lot of factories, other things like that. They can send them and sell them to a new place because there's people in that place. And also the king can pay off debts or reward people for supporting him by giving away land that really doesn't affect them because it's not anywhere close to England. Meanwhile, England gets money for the manufactured goods. They can get new goods that don't grow in England. It's kind of cold up there, so they can grow things like tobacco, indigo, and rice in the colonies and send them to England, which makes them money. And that adds to their mercantile economy, which makes the mother country strong. So, in summary, it's kind of a win-win. The people in the New World, the colonists, they get more religious freedom. So if they hate the Church of England, you can go somewhere where you can believe whatever the heck you want. You can also get way more land, which is important to a lot of English and British people. And you can also get away from the king if you don't like him. The king can get away from you if he doesn't like you. He gets more trade, which makes him more money, and can also pay off his friends. So, a couple of different types of colonies that we need to be aware of. The first one is a charter colony. You would have a company like the East India Trading Company. They would collect money from people all over England, called a joint stock company. So rich people, mainly merchants and wealthy citizens, would give money to the country or to the company, and the company would go to the king, and they would say, "Yo, King, we got all this money, we make it rain up in here, let's go ahead and start a colony." And the king would be like, "Yeah, that's cool, go ahead and start a colony, you have my blessing." And so they'd go. And once they got to the New World, usually the people in the company aren't the ones that are totally like settling, they're not the colonists. And so when the colonists go, or even before they go, they'd make some rules for the colony, and they'd usually make them what they want. Which is a lot of times that whole dissenter, like, hey, it kind of sucks in England because the king has too much power kind of stuff. And the company would be like, yeah, we're going to go ahead and go with that, mainly because without colonists, you don't have a colony. And so they'd make those rules, and as long as the charter colony exists, that charter, those rules would be in place. The next one is a proprietary colony. And so that would be where the king basically would owe political favors to somebody. He'd need to give them some land. And so rather than give it to them in England, where pretty much all the land is spoken for, he'd just give them lots of land in the New World. For example, the Lords Proprietors, or Penn's Woods, Penn's Sylvania. Were two proprietary colonies, North and South Carolina, were given to the Lords Proprietors. You see them here. And so they'd take the land mainly because who wouldn't want it? And so now they just like, a lot of these guys are really super rich Englishmen. They have no desire to go live in Carolina where it's hot and there's mosquitoes and all that kind of crap. And so they need to get people to go run the colony that they were just given. And nobody would want to go. And so to get people to go, they would basically offer them land and freedom. Basically, if you can get over there, you can have land, and we don't care what the heck you do once you're there. And then people would be like, yeah, that sounds good to us. Let's get there as fast as we can. Now, eventually, these colonies, most of the charter colonies and the proprietary colonies kind of fell apart. Usually they had to pay more money to protect the colonies than they would make in the colonies. They don't have armies. And so eventually they would try to give them away. And so what they would do is they would give them away to the king. Basically, yo, king, we're tapping out. We're done with these colonies. would you please take them off of our hands? The king would take the colonies from them, and now we have royal colonies. But in some ways, the royal colonies were always a little bit of a royal pain. And what I mean by that is the people that ended up in the colonies were not what you would call loyal, you know, enthusiastic supporters of the British governmental system. In general, when they got to the New World, they got used to kind of running their own shows. And remember, this is important to Englishmen anyway, that whole Parliament, Magna Carta thing. But in the colonies, it kind of gets put on steroids because they actually get to run themselves, and the king is like 4,000 miles across an ocean. And so they pretty much get to do what they want. So they're used to self-rule. They're also more independent. In England, you have a lot of poor people who don't own any land and are basically counting on the government to help take care of them. In America, pretty much anybody who wants land has it, which means they kind of get used to running their own shows. They're educated, mainly because they're independent and they have money and land that they also can pay for an education. And so colonists are way more educated than the people in England at the same time. They're also used to religious freedom. In England, you have a Church of England. The king is the leader of the Church of England, and basically what he says goes. Now, the king is kind of, in England by the 1700s, he's pretty much letting people do whatever they want, but technically and officially, the king is still in charge. The colonists, on the other hand, they're pretty much used to being in charge of their own beliefs and their own systems. Also, we have a whole group of people that pretty much left England because they thought it sucked to be there. And so, you get these colonists. Oh, and by the way, because they're used to defending themselves, they own and know how to use guns, like way more than people in England, because you don't have Indian attacks on the frontier all the time. And you have an English army in England that is in your backyard instead of 4,000 miles across an ocean. So, in these royal colonies, we basically have a royal pain. We have a whole bunch of people that are used to doing things their own way. They're smart enough to know the difference when you try to trick them into it. And they're basically there because they want to do things their own way and don't want a king to tell them how to do it differently. It shouldn't be too hard to imagine this situation and how easy it is that it goes sideways. And so for a while, the king enacts what we call salutary neglect, basically leaves the colonists alone, which makes things worse because they get used to doing all of this stuff this way. And so when the king in 1763 starts to treat the colonies like colonies again, they kind of take offense to it. And we have ourselves basically the foundations of American government are built on these kind of ideas, mainly because of their situation. Most of these ideas are British ideas that go to the colonies and get mutated into something else by the toxic sludge that is just a totally different political and geographic situation, which leads to totally different demographics, totally different everything. And so that basically is, in a nutshell, how the colonial governments, although they are definitely British, also become definitely not British because they mutate into something that we're going to end up calling American.